guys, I'm here today to do part 2 of my birthday book haul. I'll link part 1 up here in case you haven't seen that. You can go and check it out. In that part I show the books that I was very kindly gifted for my birthday. In this part I'm going to talk about the books I treated myself to. I think there's 10 or 11 books, 2 of which haven't arrived yet. But I had a look on the bookshop's website today and they said they're going to be delayed, so I didn't want to hold up on talking about the rest of the books. So I'm just going to talk about those 2 books but show you pictures rather than the physical copies. I hope that's okay, I'm sure it is. So yeah, got a great stack here. I'm very excited. A really good mix of fiction and non-fiction, really recent releases and books that I've been wanting for a little bit longer, and just a good mix of genres and all sorts of things. So it's very exciting. So the first one is particularly exciting because I think this could be one of my books of the year. I'm planning to read this in June, so hold me to that. And that is Thick and Other Essays by Tressie, McMillan, Cottom. So I watched this author in conversation with Roxane Gay. I will link the video, well, I'll link it up here, that's easier for you guys. And I also listened to her on the podcast of Reading Woman. She was interviewed on the podcast about this essay collection. She is hilarious, she is so intelligent, really insightful, and just, I hate it when people say a brilliant voice, but she is a brilliant voice. So this is a collection of 8 essays that discusses what it is like to be a black woman in America. It talks about sexism, pop culture, academia, what it's like to write a memoir, to be in the sort of academic world. I think it's going to be phenomenal. I've listened to excerpts of it and think it sounds brilliant. I cannot wait to get to it. The next one is another non-fiction book, and that one is a memoir, and it's In the Dream House by Carmen Machado. I do really like this edition. I like the North American edition as well, but I think this one's pretty cool, so I'm very glad to have it. So I have also watched Carmen Machado in lots of interviews. I will find one of the ones I really enjoyed. I mean, they're all great, but I'll link one of them down below and above so you can go and check it out. This is a memoir about her being in an abusive queer relationship, and this is told in a series of, I guess, experimental sort of vignettes slash essays. So each of the chapters, we can call them, are called Dream House as and then something. So for example, let's have a little look. Dream House as daydream, Dream House as high fantasy, Dream House as world building. And throughout those sections she uses different writing styles to talk about this relationship. It's not in chronological order, so it dances around the history of their relationship, and she read segments out in the interview that I watched and they were absolutely beautiful, so gripping, devastating, really intelligent. I think I'm going to love this one as well. The next book I'm going to talk about is a pretty chunky graphic memoir. You guys might know if you've been here for a while that I really enjoy graphic memoirs. They're my favourite type of graphic book. So one of those that I've really been wanting to read since I saw Mel talk about it on the channel, Mel's Bookland Adventures, which you should definitely be subscribed to, I'll link it up here, is Grass by Keum Gendry-Kim. I apologise if I've pronounced that wrong, I'm sure I have. And this is translated from the Korean by Janice. So this is, like I said, a pretty hefty graphic memoir, and I think this is going to be a really difficult read, but a really important one, and one that I think I'll get a lot out of. I don't want to say I'll enjoy it because it's about a pretty difficult subject. So this is about comfort women, as they were termed by the Japanese, which is effectively women who were used as sex slaves during lots of the conflict with Japan in Korea and in other countries as well. And this follows the history of, I think, the author and maybe her family before her, and what it was like for those women who were put through that. So I recently read about some of that experience in How We Disappeared by Jing Lee, which I really enjoyed. So it made me want to read more voices, both fiction and non-fiction, talking about that, so I picked this one up. And then I spent a few hours, to be honest, looking into short story collections. I used to read loads of short story collections and love them, and I don't know what it is, but the last few years I've barely read any. I think in part I haven't heard about as many as I've been excited about, and I don't know if that's my fault for not doing as much research as I used to do, or just there hasn't been as many collections coming out that I'm excited about. But I wanted to try and get back into them because, you know, I used to love them, as I said. So I decided, because it's Asian American Heritage Month in the US, to try and look into some Asian American collections, and there was quite a few I wanted to pick up, but I decided to limit myself to one, and that one is Deceit and Other Possibilities by Vanessa. Vanessa is a Chinese American author, and this is her debut short story collection, and this is a collection that focuses on families in different generations who are navigating life between China and the US, and it says it looks at the conflict between self and society, tradition and change. And like all the reviews I was reading about this on Goodreads and also from like literary journals and things, it made it sound really, really interesting and the sort of short story collection I could really enjoy. So I'm excited for this one. And then next I have one which I'm sure you've all heard of, so I'm barely going to speak about it, and that is Station 11 by Emily St John Mandel. When this first came out I wasn't really interested in it, which is odd because I do quite like a dystopian novel, but I think the Shakespeare bit put me off. And then, you know, over the years I've got a bit more interested in it, and I'm one of those people who right now sort of does feel like I'm inclined to read dystopian stuff in the current situation, maybe just so things feel a bit more relatable. So I decided to pick this one up, and to be honest, I started it as soon as it arrived and I'm about a third of the way through and I'm not loving it. I thought I'd really enjoy it, and actually I'm a bit unsure about it, so I've put it down. I'm going to go back to it in June and try and finish it then. But yeah, undecided on this one, so I'll come back to you at a later date about it. The next one is a new release and it's another chunky one, and that is The Other Bennet Sister by Janice Hadlow. I saw Jen talk about this and say how sort of cosy and comforting it was. And whilst I just said that I felt like reading dystopian novels, I also feel like reading cosy and comforting things. So I decided to pick this up. This is quite chunky, it's around 650 pages, and Pride and Prejudice itself is quite a short book. I don't know if I said, this is a retelling of Pride and Prejudice from Mary's perspective. So if you don't know much about Pride and Prejudice, Mary is one of the 5 Bennet sisters and she is the sort of quietest, most serious Bennet sister. She comes across as quite low and low-spirited compared to all of her sisters, and this is her telling the story of Pride and Prejudice, and it starts a little bit before the novel does and then it ends much after the novel, I think. So you actually see Elizabeth marry Mr. Darcy and then what happens after that from Mary's point of view. So I think that sounds very intriguing and I'm hoping to really enjoy this one. So the next book is a very new release. This is published in Canada, I believe, but I could get hold of it in the UK. And I think this book is going to win, if there is such a prize, the Most Beautiful Cover of the Year award, and that is the Subtweet by Vivek Shraya. I actually looked up who did the cover. I'm going to write their name here. All of their artwork is phenomenal, so it's just very exciting. So I've only ever read Vivek Shraya's poetry collection, Even This Page Is White, and I thought it was absolutely excellent. I don't read a lot of poetry, but I loved it, so definitely recommend that. So when I saw that it had a beautiful cover and it was by Vivek Shraya, I was like, pretty much whatever it's about, I'm going to be intrigued. But when I read what it was about, I was even more excited, because it sounds quite different to what I would usually read, and it also sounds very contemporary, which is something I'm getting more and more interested in. I'm really enjoying books that are very current, and when an author is really aware that they are dating their books by setting them so much in the moment, I find that really interesting. So we follow 2 musicians who build this massive friendship when they become a global sensation after a song they do together just completely takes off. And everybody becomes really obsessed with their friendship because it's all over Twitter and people just love like watching them banter off one another, or bounce off one another I should say. And then one of them retweets something or subtweets something the other one has said, and it goes wrong. It does not work out, and it's about that friendship, that really famous friendship, being watched by the world as it goes down in flames. I think that sounds fascinating and like something I haven't read before, so I'm very interested in it. This next one is newly published in the UK, but I think it's actually been out for quite a few years in the US and perhaps other countries, and that is Silver Sparrow by Tayari Jones. So An American Marriage was the first book of Tayari Jones that was published in the UK, so now the publisher are going back and publishing her previous works, of which Silver Sparrow is one. So I had this one on pre-order because I really enjoyed An American Marriage. This is told from the perspective of 2 sisters who I think don't know about one another, or I think perhaps one of them knows about the other one, but the other one doesn't know about her. Does that make sense? Basically, their father's a bigamist. He has 2 families. He has his public family, who are wealthy, and then he has his private family who struggle a lot more financially because he doesn't support them as much. And I think the private family, the secret family, know about the public one, but the public do not know about the private. And we follow as something happens and these 2 sisters begin to know about one another. I really love Tayari Jones' voice. I thought An American Marriage was brilliant, so I'm really looking forward to seeing how the dynamic of this relationship and these 2 voices works in this novel. And the last one I have in physical form is another chunky one. I've got quite a lot of chunky books in this stack, and this is a non-fiction one, and that is The Heartbeat of Wounded Knee, Native America from 1890 to the Present by David Treuer. So this has only just been released in the UK, so again I had this one on pre-order. I think it's been out for about 6 months in the US, I could be wrong there. I'm going to link Kendra's review of this. She spoke about this a month or so ago in one of her wrap-ups. She said it was absolutely phenomenal. I was so happy to hear that because I already had it on pre-order, and then when I heard her talk about it I was just even more excited. I had to really stop myself from ordering the hardback US edition of this one, but I'm glad to see that it's been released straight to paperback in the UK because it's just going to be easier to hold. So this is what it says on the front. You know, there's a few books that have done this that I've been interested in, but I've sort of held off because I'm always unsure the tone they do it in, and I'm just never feel completely confident about it. But I heard people talk really positively about this one, the way it presents the history and the way it doesn't romanticise it or make it too hopeful, but also the way it doesn't say, oh, you know, life for Native Americans is over, like we've completely destroyed a culture, as if to say these people no longer exist, when actually some of these people of course do exist and are living and are still owed reparations for what's happened to them. So I think it's a really hard and fine line to get right, and from what I've heard this book does that, so I'm really excited to read it, although I'm sure it's going to be a really difficult but informative read. So I'm on to the last two, and these are the ones I don't have copies of, so I'll put some pictures up for you. They look beautiful, so I cannot wait for them to arrive in the post, obviously so I can read them as well. The first one is Sabrina and Corina by Fajardo-Anstine. I hope I've said that right, apologies if I haven't. This is another short story collection, so I'm very excited to have a couple of short story collections to pick up. So the blurb says this is about Latinas of Indigenous descent. I think they all live in Denver, Colorado, and it says here it's a moving narrative of unrelenting feminine power and an exploration of the universal experiences of abandonment, heritage, and an eternal sense of home. I've had a lot of people talk about this one and it sounds absolutely brilliant, so I'm very excited to read it. And lastly, I have a memoir, and this sounds absolutely phenomenal as well. So I've got so many amazing non-fiction books here. So if I do say so myself, I mean I can because I didn't write them, so it's completely fine to say that. So I'm probably going to butcher the pronunciation here, so I deeply apologise, but I've tried to look up how to pronounce this and I can't find out how, okay? So this book is called In My Own Moccasins, A Memoir of Resilience by Helen Knott. And Helen Knott is a Dane, San, Nahiba and mixed Euro descent woman living in Fort St John, British Columbia. I'm sure I said a lot of that wrong. So I'm going to link a video where the author is discussing some of the history of her people and her research now. She's a social worker and an activist to do with violence against First Nations women. So I'm going to link the video up here so you can go and watch that because she talks brilliantly. I don't know if that was out around the time the memoir came out, I'm not 100% sure, but it's a really interesting video. This is about the violence she suffered growing up, the addiction that followed because of that, and the resilience she built to be able to live the life she lives now, and the work she does with First Nations women to do with the violence against those communities. It sounds absolutely brilliant. The reviews are amazing, so of course I can't wait to read this one either. So those are all the books that I picked up for myself for my birthday. I would love to hear if you've read any of these, what you thought about them. Feel free to recommend me lots more books. Obviously you're probably getting a taste here for the sort of non-fiction I enjoy, so feel free to recommend me lots more. And also I would love more recommendations for short story collections because, as I said, I've really fallen out of the habit the last few years and I'm sure I've missed some amazing collections, so do feel free to recommend me more. You know, the two I mentioned, those are the sort of things I find really interesting in any format, but particularly in short stories, so do feel free to recommend me any others that you've read that you enjoyed that sound like that. Thanks ever so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!